Hello and welcome to this, our 48th live stream, Good Friday, Orthodox style. Of course, this is in celebration of Good Friday in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. Okay? Now, this is stems out of the fact that Eastern Orthodox Easter and Good Friday usually happens at a different time than, say, in the Western tradition. In the Western tradition, Easter is calculated after basically the Sunday after the first full moon of that occurs after March 31st. Now, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, there's an additional rule to calculating Easter. And that additional rule is that if Easter happens to land on, if that calculation happens to land on a Passover, Easter has to be 1 week later. Okay? And this year, Good Friday landed on a Passover. So this year, Eastern Orthodox Easter is 1 week later. So that's why Eastern Orthodoxy is right now celebrating Easter at a different time. Okay? Now, there is a little housekeeping I do need to take care of here. Just to let everybody know that I'm not feeling well. Okay? I happen to have contracted the pandemic right now that everyone is afraid of. And I'm under quarantine. So I'm been told that I have to take at least 5 days off of work to recover, so I don't infect anyone. So not at my best here. I probably won't be at my best. I may make lots of mistakes tonight, just because I've got stuffy head, coughing a lot. I think the worst of it is over, but I am recovering. So, yeah, I've got the Rona. Yeah, I had to actually go all across town today looking for an antigen test because my employer won't let me go back to work without basically taking an antigen test and basically proving whether it's the Rona or not. Well, it turned out it was. So, I'm actually sort of surprised I held out this long before getting it. And I am fully vaccinated, by the way. I am fully vaccinated. So, we are going to get to your questions. We are going to do all the super chats. We're going to do all that. We're going to try to do all the same thing. I will limp through this. So, and the reason I will limp through this is because I do love doing the Q&A so much. The other thing is I just want to let everybody know that because I was off today, I actually had time to film a popcorn review. So on May 2nd, we are going to be doing another popcorn review. So I would invite everyone to join us Monday, May 2nd at 8 p.m. We're going to be doing a premiere where we do our next popcorn review. I mean, I can't say what it's about, but because it's always a surprise. But we've filmed it; it's in the can, and we're really, really excited about this. We're looking forward to this. So I hope you can join us for that. So we're going to get to your questions. And it's the same as always. Super chats have priority. If we do take non-super chats also, but we ask that for non-super chat you begin the question with a Q and a colon. We ask that you ask the question only once. And we also ask that if it happens to involve a Bible verse or a foreign word, that you give us a little bit of context, particularly where you can find the verse, or or what you think the word means in what language. So again, we have a little bit of context to go on. It just helps us so much because we do so many different things. Okay? So, with that said, let's get to it. And we'll start with 3 non-super chats. Okay? The first non-super chat is from Cam Britt, and he asks, what are your thoughts on Psalm 22:16? Is it pierced or like a lion, or a combination of both, most likely the original intent? Okay. I'm going to pull up the Bible here. And I'm going to go to Psalm 22 and 16. I'm just going to read the passage. Okay, and the passage, and I don't need much context here because this is really more of a text critical thing. And it says, for the dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers has encompassed me, they have pierced my hands and my feet. Now, what's at issue here is the word pierced. And by the way, thank you for putting this in advance. I had to actually look some of this stuff in the text to do a little bit of text critical work before I actually could answer this. So I'm glad you actually asked this in advance, because it gave me the time to actually look it up. What's at issue here is the word pierced. Okay. Now, if you look at the difference between like a lion, which is ki ori, or kori, which is pierced, it's a difference of one letter. One letter. And that one letter is an aleph. Okay? In the Masoretic text, it is ki ori with the aleph. So it is like a lion. But if you look at the Septuagint, it says pierced. But we also had a Dead Sea Scroll, which is 4Q Psalm F, which has the Kaf Resh Yod, or at least would have the Yod. I think the Yod is not actually there because that's part of the fragment. But we do see it's definitely Kaf and Resh. There's no aleph there, so that's pierced. So the evidence does seem to lead more towards pierced than like a lion. Okay, just off of that. Now, when you look at, say, the Syriac Peshta, the Septuagint, say the translations, the ancient translations, it does seem to be leaning more towards along the lines of pierced. Yet most of, say, the Hebrew manuscripts that have survived is like a lion. As I said, the exception here being, say, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls seem to lean more towards pierced. So, the idea of this then, when we look at the text, and they said, a band of evildoers has encompassed me like a lion, my hands and my feet. Like a lion are my hands and my feet, maybe? It's definitely a more difficult reading. It's definitely more difficult reading. But I also think, too, it may not be the oldest reading. I think the superior reading here is probably pierced. And I don't necessarily have a messianic leaning here. Okay? So, I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with this being like a lion if that's where the evidence leads. But I just don't think in this particular case that's where it leads. I think that we have enough textual information here that says that the pierced is the better reading. So, even though our Masoretic texts tend to be like a lion. So anyway, thank you very much for that question. It's a great question, and it did take a little bit of searching, and I'm glad I have answered it. Okay, our next non-super chat comes from Matthew Chanel, and he asks, what is the most likely date for Jesus' birth, year and month? Are there any specific times of the year that have been ruled out? Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Okay, yeah. The year is pretty much been narrowed down to, say, So either between 4 and 6 BC. Okay, I tend to lean more towards 4 BC, and I think most scholars do these days. But there's no way to be absolutely certain of this. As far as the month is concerned, nobody knows the month. Seasons that can be ruled out, yes, there are some seasons that can be ruled out. Winter can be ruled out. The fact is that Israel went through, at times, torrential rains during winter. And that made travel very, very difficult. Nobody in ancient times was expected to travel during the time of winter. It was just... the roads weren't good enough. There were flash floods, like wadis, that could kill you. It was just not a feasible thing to do. So you didn't actually see a lot of travel happening in the winter. If it occurred in spring, it would probably have occurred after the barley harvest in late March, early April. So it's most likely the birth of Christ would have most likely take place in either late spring into summer or even fall. Probably not even summer because, again, the heat would have been probably too unbearable. I think most people will say either late spring or fall or early fall. But we can't be sure. We honestly can't be sure. We don't have enough information to go on here. Okay. So pretty much we can rule out the most inclement times. So you can rule out pretty much the height of summer and winter. Because, again, it would have been unbearable to travel during those times. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the question. It was a good question. And then finally we have Joseph Green, who asks, what are your thoughts on the Shroud of Turin and the recent wide-angle X-ray scattering data, 2,000 years old versus 700 years old? Thanks and Shabbat Shalom. Well, Shabbat Shalom to you too. I don't think the Shroud of Turin is the Shroud of Christ. I just don't think so. And I'm going to give you my reason right here. Let's go to John chapter 20. John chapter 20. And I think this is really what puts the nail in the coffin for the Shroud of Turin. Okay? And this is John 20 is when Mary Magdalene and Simon Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved, presumably John, arrived at the tomb. And they inspect the tomb. And verse 5, and stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there. Wrappings, plural. Okay? This is a plural. More than one piece of cloth. Okay? And it doubles down on this. Verse 6, Simon Peter therefore came in, followed him, entered the tomb, and he beheld the linen wrappings lying there. And the face cloth, which had been on his head, not lying, and that is not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So what we gather from this is that the shroud that was used to bury Christ was made of many pieces. Okay? More than one piece of linen. The Shroud of Turin is a single piece of cloth. It's a single piece of cloth. It's a unified piece. Okay? It hasn't been patched together from several pieces. It's a single piece of linen. So, even if it does date to 2,000 years ago, it's not the Shroud of Christ. It cannot be the Shroud of Christ. And it can't be the Shroud of Christ because the description we have of the Shroud of Christ is something that's made of multiple pieces. So, I think here there's some evidential problems here that are really problematic for the Shroud of Turin being the Shroud of Christ. So, I don't really buy it. But anyway, that's my opinion. So, and I know people will still believe it because it inspires them and gives them faith, and they're welcome to that. I'm not gonna rat on anyone's faith. I mean, I'm not into that. But I personally don't find it convincing. I don't find it convincing. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. It's a good question. It's an interesting question. Okay, now we're going to get to the super chats. Our first super chat by Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. What does Genesis 2:5 mean? Is it as young Earth creationists claim? Okay. Let's go to Genesis. Genesis 2, 5 through 6. Okay. We really need to start the context here at verse 4. And the verse says, "This is the count of heavens and earth when they were created in the day that the Lord made the earth and heaven. Now no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for the Lord God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. But a mist used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. And then the Lord formed man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man created a living being." Okay. Now, the young Earth creationists are really going to claim that this was really 5 and 6 represent what happens in, say, the first days between, say, the creation of man in day 6 and the day that the Lord created heaven and earth, day 1. Okay? Now, the problem is there's actually no extrapolation of time. Yes, I know that the young Earth creations are going to really sort of interpret this as saying, aha, see, there was no shrub in the field yet, and no rain, and no mist, and the Lord hadn't planted the world yet. So that's coming. That's coming. You know, day 4, day 3, etc. The problem is there's other ways to interpret this as well. Okay, there's other ways to interpret this as well. I know the old Earth creationists have their own particular interpretation of this. Theistic evolutionists have their own interpretation of this. It's really more of a C double down, this is what we mean sort of deal. So, you know, it's more of a proof by assertion. Proof by assertion. And I think that there are many ways to explain this that don't necessarily feed into young Earth creationist claims. Now, I'm not against young Earth creationist claims per se. I do have my limits, though. I do have my limits. Let me put it this way. I have a much more disagreement with American young Earth creationism than I do with, say, continental young Earth creationism. But those arguments tend to be, those differences tend to be a lot more along the lines of, say, hermeneutics and history than they are, say, theology. Okay? So, without knowing specifically what the young Earth creationist is claiming here, it's a little hard to really answer this in a lot of detail. I can only answer this in vague generalities because I'm not exactly sure which young Earth creationist claim you're referring to. So that's probably the best I can answer that right now. But I want to thank you for that super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, put that down. And the next super chat is from Brick Creation for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he says, "Hi, Dr. Falk. Some preterists say that Revelation 19:11-14 happened around 66 AD and point to Josephus, Tacitus, and Sefer Josephon mentioning an arming in the sky chariots. Any rebuttals to this? Okay. I do have some issues with this. Now, one of the big things about the big preterist claims, is that Nero was the Antichrist. Okay? And that Nero is responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem at 70 AD. Okay? This is sort of the big claim. This is the big claim of preterism. Okay? If we have one big idea of preterism, is that the abomination of the desolation is Nero, who destroys the temple, who destroys Jerusalem in 70 AD. That's the big claim. Okay? There's some issues here. And I think probably the biggest issue was... well, let's also get to where we get to 66 AD. Okay, 66 AD is when you have the Jerusalem riots. Essentially, zealots do some riots in Jerusalem and try to overthrow the Roman governance. Okay? And they're not successful. They're not really successful. So, I do think here that there's an issue there. The fact is that Nero had been dead 2 years by the time the temple was destroyed. Nero died in 68 AD. He died in 68 AD. The destruction of the temple was in 70 AD. It's really hard to claim that Nero is the Antichrist when he's already been dead for 2 years. He's been dead as a door knocker. And it's Vespasian that ends up becoming emperor. And he's already in the middle of the siege of Jerusalem when he gets recalled back to Rome to secure his throne and then come back to Jerusalem to finish the siege. So I don't see this working, honestly. I mean, I know the preterists really want to make this work. I just don't see it. Arming the sky with chariots, well, okay, that's sort of poetic language at best here, but I don't see it. I think it's wishful thinking. I mean, I know at the time the destruction of Jerusalem was a cataclysmic event for the Jewish people, for the Israelites. But it's one thing to claim, say, the destruction of Jerusalem, but it's yet another thing to try to read Revelation completely in the light of those events. And so I've said it before, I just have a real difficulty with the preterist claims. It's just not a historically good fit, as much as they really want to compress that in. So you can't make Revelation, you can't shoehorn it into the historical events of the 1st century AD. It just doesn't work. There's too much cognitive load, too much baggage that you're going to have to make it work. So, it just ain't happening. So anyway, I want to thank you for that super chat. Very much appreciated, but it's not working for me. Okay. Brick Creation for $5. Thank you very much for the further super chat. Any evidence that the Jews lived in Egypt during the 6th century BC as stated in Jeremiah 44:1 and the effect of Jeremiah's prophecy in 44:11 to 14, 25 to 30. Okay, let's bring up our Bible here. Isaiah 44. Okay. Oh, sorry, Jeremiah. Sorry, Jeremiah. Jeremiah 44. Okay. The word came to Jeremiah for all the Jews living in the land who were living in Migdol, Taphanes, Memphis, and the land of Pathros, saying, okay. Now, Memphis, we all know where Memphis is. It's in the middle of Egypt. It's really near the administrative capital of Egypt. Pathros is Upper Egypt, very close to Elephantine. And we do actually have evidence of Israelites living in Elephantine. We have a lot of Aramaic and Aramaic papyri from that period that were written by Israelites who had settled in Elephantine and became mercenaries. We also have evidence of Israelites living at Pelusium, which is in the North Sinai. It's roughly near the Egyptian fortress of Charu. Okay? So we do have some evidence of Jewish Israelites living in Egypt during the 6th century BC. So that we have. Now, the effect of Jeremiah's prophecy in 11:14, and we'll cover that. Let's see if 11 states, therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, God of Israel, behold, I'm going to set my face against you for woe, even to cut off all Judah. And I will take the remnant of Judah who have set their mind for entering the land of Egypt to reside there, and they will all meet their end in the land of Egypt. They will fall by the sword, meet their end by famine. Both small and great shall die by the sword and by the famine, and they will become a curse, an object of horror, and imprecation, and reproach. And I will punish those who live in the land of Egypt, as I have punished Jerusalem with sword, famine, and pestilence. So there will be no refugees or survivors for the remnant of Judah who have entered the land of Egypt to reside there, and then to return to the land of Egypt to which they are longing to return and live, for none will return except a few refugees. Okay. Now, it is true that at Elephantine, there were riots. Okay. The Israelites at Elephantine constructed a temple of Yahweh there. And this did not sit well with the Egyptian priesthood of Khnum, who lived there. So the Egyptians basically rioted. They rioted against the Israelites living there, and killed many of them. They ended up destroying the temple there, the temple of Yahweh. And just, made it untenable for them to live there any longer. So their end at... but we also know, too, that when the Israelites did resettle in Elephantine, that they did start adopting pagan practices once again. They started burning incense to the Queen of Heaven. And we do find that, what's it called now? Text to this effect in the Aramaic papyri from Elephantine. So we do know that the Israelites were not well behaved once they did, evacuate to Egypt. We have less information from Pelusium, and that's because we have less texts. But we do know that after Jeremiah's prophecy, that there were at least 5-6 cities that were established in Egypt that had substantial Israelite settlements. Now, 25 through 30. I won't read this whole thing because it's very long. Oh, we got an extension of that, huh? Oh. Okay, the only problem is that's dropped off already. Okay, here's one of the things. When you give me a super chat really, really early, I'll capture the super chat, but I may not capture all the other material that goes with it. So unfortunately, I did not capture your extension to that question. But you have already given me a lot here. So, I'm just going to take a quick read of that passage. I'm not going to read it out loud because it's very long. I'll scan it quickly. Yeah, it says here in verse 25, they performed our vows and vowed to burn sacrifice to the Queen of Heaven and pour out libations to her. The idea of burning sacrifices here. It's not sacrifices as much as it is incense. It's thurifying, basically burning incense. And this is in verse 25, and pour out libation offerings. And we do know that the Egyptians did both of these. They did both thurification and they did libation offerings. And we do have evidence that they did end up doing this in Elephantine. So, that's all that's been verified. Let's see, anything else here of really significance? Again, it's a repeat. They will eat their end by famine and sword. And that those who return will be few in number. Now, we do have some records of them sending letters from Elephantine back to Israel. So there is some, we do know that they did keep touch with their relatives in Judah. So those who fled to Elephantine, that they did keep correspondence. They didn't remain just isolated. They did send letters to and from. So we don't know how long that lasted, probably only a couple of generations. But, we do know that the people at Elephantine tried to maintain at least contacts with their relations in Judah. But it is unlikely that any of them returned, or very, very few of them ever returned. So that's probably the best I can answer this question. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. We wish we had more, like in all cases of archaeology, we're dealing with fragments. But we are very, very fortunate to have as much as we do have for the Israelite settlement at Elephantine. Because it's a lot more than we have even for a lot of Israelite settlements in Israel, honestly. We probably know more about the settlement at Elephantine than we do about, say, life in Jerusalem. So that's very telling right there. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Did I cover that second one? No, you probably did. Okay. Our next super chat is from Corey Coogan. I think it's for Romanian, 50 Romanian. Thank you very much for the super chat. Do Egyptian daybooks give a precedent for the sons of Jacob in Avaris Goshen to keep written records of the patriarchs, and could Moses have used them? What were the Hyksos and New Kingdom daybooks like? Okay, I'll answer the last one first. We don't actually have any Hyksos daybooks. Wish we did. The whole Hyksos corpus can be... all the writings we have of the Hyksos period can be put in a single book of about 25 pages. And we do know this because there was a Ben publication that published the entire writings of the Second Intermediate Period in a 50-page volume, half of which were blank pages. So, we don't have much from the Second Intermediate Period. Now, the New Kingdom, we do have daybooks. And we have a daybook that was found at Deir el-Medina. And that was wonderful. Because in that daybook, it's a local administrator that's keeping track of the events at the town. And basically what they looked like was they would start off with the year, the day, the month. So, third regnal year of Ramses III, month 2 of summer, day 5. Okay, such and such happened on this day. Basically, worker got hurt on this day or something like that. So that's how they would sort of keep their records. Is they would mark the day, and then they would fill in what happened on that day, and then right below it they start with the next day, and so on and so on and so on. So it was an organized, methodical way of keeping a record of what was happening locally. So we do extrapolate from that, which is that records like this were probably being kept all across Egypt at the time. Although we just don't have a lot of them, in all honesty. Now, given that some place as small as Deir el-Medina would have these records, it would be incredulous not to think that larger settlements, like, say, at Thebes or at Paramses, wouldn't have something similar. So I also would think, too, that, say, at Avaris Goshen, yeah, you'd see the same thing. So I do think that the Egyptian daybooks and, frankly, the Egyptian tendencies to keep written records would have provided an inspiration for the sons of Jacob to do something similar. Okay? And, for example, Moses, he would have been trained as a scribe. He grew up in the household of the governor of Lower Egypt. He would have had access to what was called a royal cough, which is a kind of training school for scribes. And there would have been one of these at Avaris. So Moses would have been taught this. Moses would have been taught how to keep records. He would have taught how to keep meticulous records in multiple languages. So he would have been taught to write in Egyptian, both hieroglyphic and hieratic. He also would have been taught Akkadian. So he would have known how to basically do these things in, say, multilingual terms. So there's a lot here of precedents that could go into what inspired the writing of the Pentateuch here. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it.
He reposted for me. I was going to say that the preterists get their info from Tacticus, the histories 5.13, and Josephus, the wars on the Jews 6.5.3, mentioning an army in the cloud.
Okay, I don't see it, but
It's near the end.
okay. It has looked like my my Twidget is acting up again.
I don't know if it's a Twidget. It's just a comment to me.
Yeah, but I would see it in my Twidget if I have it. I have to reload it. Okay, I see it now. Okay. His follow-up, Brick Creation's follow-up to his question is, thanks, I was going to say that the preterists get their info from Tacitus, the Histories, 5.13, and Josephus, the Wars of the Jew, 6.53, mentioning an army in the clouds. I haven't looked at those passages. I'm not familiar with them, so I can't comment further on them. It's possible that they might have gotten them from this, but it's also possible that it is an extrapolation to what was floating in the apocalyptic literature of the time as well. So we do know that in the 1st century AD that there was a lot of apocalyptic literature floating around. So there could have been a sign in the sky that looked like an army in the clouds. It's possible. But whether or not that is the same as what's meant in Revelation 19, again, I'd have to look into this. I'd have to do some more research. But I don't think that's... I don't think that, balances out the historical problems of preterism. I just don't. So anyway, thank you for clarifying that. It's interesting. I'll actually have to look this up because now I'm intrigued. I think this is an interesting thing. So thank you very much for pointing that out. That sounds very interesting. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Let's see here, and the next super chat is from Benjamin J. for $19.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate your support of our channel. Okay. He says, love the channel and thanks for all your hard work. Oh, you're most welcome. It's a labor of love. Sometimes I think we love it a little too much because we do get run down sometimes, but it is a labor of love. We do very, very much supporting the community here. And he asks, could you explain how the temple motif is woven into Genesis 1 and 2 and recommend any resources for further reading on the topic? Thanks again. You're most welcome. The resource I would recommend is John Walton's Lost World, I think is Genesis. Or is it Creation? I don't remember. But John Walton is probably the resource to go to on this. He probably is the guy who can best explain how, say, temple motifs and mythohistory fit into Genesis 1 and 2. But with that said, however, I can give you a little overview here, which is that Genesis 1 is essentially organized as a matter of sacred space that God then fills. God separates the waters, okay? And, he separates the sky and the earth, creates the dry land and the seas, and basically is creating 3 zones of space. And each of those zones are populated. The three zones is basically has sort of a similar idea to, say, the 3 courts of a temple. The court of the women, the court of the men, and the court of the priests. So there is, we see this also in, say, pagan temples, where you have on the outer court a court with nature motifs, and then an inner court with stellar motifs. And then the Holy of Holies on the inside, where there's only the sacred. So we do find these in pagan temples as well. We also see the imagery of when God creates man, where it's in his image and in his likeness. This is definitely what we would call... the image here being the word selam, and likeness is demot. These are basically words that are used of pagan idols. So there is definitely here it's not a pagan idol, of course, because mankind is being made in the image of God himself, but it's similar language. It's very similar language. And then we have, say, the Garden of Eden. And the Garden of Eden is the the sacred of space. It's the sacred of the Holy of Holies. It's the Holy of Holies within all creation. This is where God decides to walk with man and meet with man. So this is the holy place. Now, we find, say, at the end of Genesis 3, after man falls and is driven out of the garden, we see that God surrounds, he sequesters the Garden of Eden. He separates it off from the rest of creation. He surrounds it with cherubim and with a flaming sword. Now, the flaming sword, that's just sort of code words for seraphim. That's a code word for seraphim, the flaming sword. That's so you don't confuse the seraphim with the serpent, the Nakash, the fallen angel. Okay? So Genesis 3 is very, very careful here not to confuse the two. But that whole idea of cherubim and seraphim surrounding the Garden of Eden to purify the space within and to drive out impurity. That's really common in temple motifs. It's common in Egyptian temple motifs where you see both Uraeus and winged goddesses protecting the holy space. We find this in, say, the Jewish temple where cherubim are used in the curtain around the Holy of Holies in the veil. Even the outer curtain of the tabernacle has cherubim weaved into it. And, of course, you have the two cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? So, these are motifs that are just, that are shared between what's happening in the Garden of Eden and what happens in, say, temples. All the time in the ancient Near East. So, if you want to know more about that, the other resource I could possibly recommend, and it doesn't actually relate to Genesis 1 and 2. I don't talk about this, but if you want to know more about these temple motifs, I can recommend my own book on the Ark of the Covenant. I'll just drag up here, which is the Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian context, where it talks about, say, cherubim and seraphim as, being these analogous symbols in the ancient Near East. So once you start sort of cluing into these symbols, you start seeing these motifs throughout both the Old and New Testaments. We find them in both places. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. Okay. The next super chat is from Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Did the magicians in Exodus 7 use magic, sleight of hand, or is it myth? Heard an argument of the etymological fallacy of laket implies number 2, sleight of hand, because it comes from hidden. Okay. Not sure. Okay, we're not sure. We do know that the Egyptians practiced ritual magic. We also know that they also did sleight of hand. We also know that they did what we would call also religious fiction. What I mean by religious fiction is, like, for example, if you go to the Oriental Institute, there's a statue of Horus that would have originally had a gold beak attached to a cord, and the priest would move the cord and then speak and make it seem as if Horus was speaking. Now, believe it or not, nobody was actually fooled by this. The Egyptians weren't naive. They weren't naive. They weren't stupid. Okay? But what it is a religious fiction. It is, they know that the priest is actually speaking, but they're suspending disbelief to accept the religious message. Okay? That's not fooling anyone. Okay? So, when it comes then to, say, what the magicians did in Exodus 7, is it magic? Maybe. Wouldn't put it past them. Is it sleight of hand? Maybe. They could do that too. I don't think it's a myth. That's the one thing I don't think. I've not decided whether it's if it's magic, if it's sleight of hand, because he did practice both. But the one thing of it being myth, that's the one thing I am convinced of, that it's not. The Egyptians did handle snakes, you know. They did handle it in the same way snake charmers would. Okay, so it's conceivable that they could easily incorporate that into some sleight of hand or in a magic ritual. So I can't say for sure. I wasn't there. Okay? So I can't say for sure if it's magic or if it's sleight of hand, and even if I was there, I might not be able to tell the difference. You know, although I am pretty good at telling sleight of hands. But it's impossible to say without actually having been there. So I'm open to it being either. I'm not opposed to it being magic, and I'm not opposed to it being sleight of hand. I mean, I've seen enough weird stuff to say, hey, okay, you know, at least I'm open to the idea of it being magic. Okay? Because I have seen some pretty weird stuff. So, anyway, as I say, the only thing I'd say it isn't is it's not myth. But I do agree that that using the laket to mean hidden is an etymological fallacy. So I will agree there, definitely. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate the question. It is an interesting question, though. Okay, Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $2. Again, thank you very much for the super chat. Did ancient Egypt have an ablution ritual like baptism? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They did have a purification ritual that involved ritual bathing. And that's what we mean like an ablution ritual like baptism. Baptism started off as a kind of ritual bathing that priests would do, you know, and in order to be purified before going up into a temple. Now, the Egyptians had this going way back. And in the case of in ancient Egypt, they would you know, go down to the river. They would shave all their hair, so all the hair on their head, all their facial hair, all of that. They would ritually bathe. They'd put on clean linens and papyrus sandals. They would wash their mouth out with natron, and then they were purified to go up into the temple. The Israelites carried on these practices. In fact, the only thing the Israelites didn't do was shave and wash out their mouths with natron. So they kept the ritual bathing. They kept the changing of clothes. So, you know, a lot of what we see in, say, Israelite temple purification ritual is that carryover from Egyptian purification ritual, which did involve ablution, which involved a kind of ritual bathing. So absolutely, they had this, absolutely, and it didn't change. Its meaning didn't change over time like it eventually did, say, in Israel. In Israel, where baptism went from something only priests did, it was something only priests did, to in the 2nd century BC, became a ritual bath, became a way to say bring Gentile women into the Jewish faith, because you couldn't circumcise them. So ritual bathing was then extended to women in the 2nd century BC, and then finally it was then given Christian connotations, as it then became something that could be that, say, John the Baptist started doing, giving it to the masses, you know, basically people who weren't priests, who were men and women alike, you know, and he would baptize people. So it is something that, say, in Israelite culture had its meanings had changed over time. But it is very, very But indeed, Egypt had an ablution ritual like baptism. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, another one from Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $5. Was Noah Mormon? Okay. You mentioned polygamy as a possibility. Is this just to make Ham less creepy? I don't think you can make Ham any less creepy, honestly. Ham was creepy. Oh, yuck. How does that fit into the 8 souls on the ark, if so? Okay. Now, you're talking here about 1 Peter. And I think it is chapter 3. I just have to take a look here. 320? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I'll pull that up. First Peter chapter 3, where it talks about who were once disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the waters. Okay. Now, I am not saying that this is the proper interpretation. Okay. But one can review the 8, regard the 8 persons here as being the ideal 8. For example, the Gospels will say Christ and the 2 thieves. And in another Gospel that you have Christ with 3 thieves. Or is it 1 and 2? I can't remember, sorry. I've got foggy head right now from the Rona, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm not exactly being all that precise here. But if you have 3 thieves, you also have 2. Or if you have 2 thieves, you also have 1. Okay. So, in that same manner, if you have, say, more than 8 people, you also have 8. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that is the correct interpretation. But we can't exclude it as a possibility either. Okay? There isn't a limiter here that says only 8. But does seem to be that there is the idea that that it wasn't a large number. But 8 here might be an ideal number, not necessarily, say, an exclusive only 8. Now, again, I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that is even what I buy, because I don't. But I'm also saying it's not beyond the realm of possibility. So, I'm open to examining, let's say, long shot interpretations, and I think that the idea that Noah was polygamous is a long shot possibility, but it is a possibility, and it is a possibility that we do need to consider at least. So so again, it is what it is. It's a long shot. It's a kind of an out there interpretation. But wow, you can't make Ham less creepy. Ham was really creepy. But the other thing too is we have to keep in mind too that the text also doesn't say that Noah's wife was Ham's mother. That's the other thing too. Okay, Ham was really creepy. Okay, but Ham may not have had relations with his mother. It may have been, as I said, a second wife. A second wife after Noah's first wife had died. Okay. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, and then We have a super chat from WQ for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. And W asks, did Egypt ever have a strong naval presence in the Mediterranean Sea? Did they have shipbuilding capabilities outside of transportation on the Nile? They did not have a huge naval presence on the Mediterranean. Now, when we mean naval presence, we mean military ships. Okay? We do know the Egyptians had a strong naval presence in the Nile. We do have ostraca that show Egyptian naval warships, which are essentially a long hull with 2 battle towers on each end. So we do have, records of, say, naval personnel that worked on the warships in the Nile. So the Egyptians did have warships, and they did have them in the Nile. But they don't seem to have used them outside in the Mediterranean. Now, with that said, the Egyptians did have a strong shipping presence in the Mediterranean. They did send boats out into the Mediterranean to trade goods all around the Mediterranean basin. We find Egyptian trade goods from, say, Greece all the way to Spain. And really, outside of Gibraltar on the east coast of Spain. So Egyptian trade goods got around. They got around in ways that we just would not have expected. Now, within the Nile Delta, within the Nile Valley, they did maintain a substantial naval presence. Part of the reason, even though, say, the Mediterranean itself, so the Nile Delta almost provided a natural barrier that prevented naval invasions, they did keep a naval presence for 2 reasons. The first reason they kept a sizable navy was to protect their outermost colonies. So, say, colonies that were more vulnerable to naval attack. For example, at the cities of Ramses and Avaris, there were naval presence there. At the fortress of Charu, there was a naval presence there. These were places where, should there have been a naval attack, it would have come down, say, the west coast of, say, Canaan, and down into the Nile, basically the Pelusiac estuary, and gone into Egypt through that corridor. So they had to keep a naval presence there to sort of keep out invaders. The other reason they had a naval presence was to actually police the Nile. The Egyptians did police the Nile. They made sure that, people were behaving. Because you did have times when, boats ran aground or collided into each other. There was a lot of trade going on down the Nile. The Nile was the preeminent route through which goods flowed through Egypt. We have to remember that there weren't roads in Egypt. And through much of Egypt's history, most of, say, the trade in the Nile wasn't done by, say, wagon. Egypt didn't even have the wheel until the Second Intermediate Period. So, you just don't, there just wasn't a lot of trade goods being shipped over land. Almost all the trade goods in Egypt were shipped on boat. So you needed a navy to basically police the Nile. So that's the second reason that they kept a sizable navy. was that they needed to regulate and police trade as it traveled up and down the Nile. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very interesting question. We haven't been asked that before. It's a really great question, though. There was an excellent book on this, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. If I remember it, I will put it down into the chat or into the comment section later on. But there's actually a book on, say, nautical terms and naval titles. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, super chat from Andrew Mansour for $5 Canadian. Thank you very much for the super chat. Your favorite Copt here? Well, absolutely, you're my favorite Copt. Thanks for streaming during our Holy Friday. My pleasure. As I said, I've got the Rona, and I'm trying to persevere through it. It's not easy, but I'm doing my best. The Orthodox Bible contains more chapters in the Old Testament. Who removed them and why? Okay. Now, this is going to really depend on which Orthodox Bible. There's no official Orthodox Bible. You have several versions of the Bible within Eastern Orthodoxy. Probably the largest of these is what we would call the Oriental Orthodox Bible. This is the Bible from Eritrea and Ethiopia. I think it has like 81 books. 81 books. And it has a lot of books that we don't find in both, say, Western Bibles or even other Eastern Orthodox patriarchies. Okay? So, in that particular case, you got a Bible that's much, much, much larger. I think it's got something like 3rd and 4th Esdras. Much more, say, extra canonical literature than we'd find in say both Eastern Orthodox or Western Bibles. Now, in some versions of, say, the Eastern Orthodox Bible, it is based upon the Septuagint, and there are some chapters in the Septuagint that are different than, say, what we would find in, say, the Masoretic text. Western Bibles tend to be based upon the Masoretic text as far as its structure and its content. In Eastern Orthodox Bibles that, say, it might have the Apocrypha. For example, they might have, Ecclesiasticus, for example, which is part of the Apocrypha. Ecclesiasticus is like, even though the name means little Ecclesiastes, it's like 4 times longer than Ecclesiastes. So some of that can be attributed to what books from the Apocrypha are included. Some of that can be chalked up to that there are extended versions of some books as well. So it's really going to depend. It's really going to depend on which Orthodox Bible we're talking about. So unless we go to get into specifics, I mean, we actually covered a lot here anyway. So it's really going to actually depend upon which one we're talking about. But those are the reasons why it's longer in some cases than our Western Bibles. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Interesting question. Very much appreciated. Okay, and then we got Zedek for $19.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Why was Moses worried about being stoned for making a sacrifice, which he says is the abomination of the Egyptians in Exodus 8:26? Thanks, God bless. The reason is because it's the sacrifices to Yahweh are usually sheep. Okay? Sheep or lambs. Okay? These were considered unclean animals for Egyptian sacrifice. Now, bull and bovine sacrifices were no problem for the Egyptians. Okay? If you sacrifice a bull or a cow, no big deal in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, sacrificed oryx, bulls, that sort of thing all the time. And they typically had a slaughterhouse outside the temple where that was done. The animal would be slaughtered outside the temple, and then the meat would be brought in and presented to the god. And that was okay. But there were some unclean animals that just did not sit well with the Egyptians. And sheep's a big one. Sheep and goats. Sheep and goats. So if you want to start a riot in ancient Egypt, you sacrifice a sheep at a temple. Now, we have to understand that by the time of Moses, the Canaanite temples in Egypt had become thoroughly Egyptianized. We've got, for example, like the Temple of Baal at Avaris. Even though it had been started by Canaanites, by the time of Moses, it had been thoroughly Egyptianized. So the whole idea of unclean sacrifices as far as the Egyptians were concerned is novel. Yeah. Mouse. Yeah, we've got a mouse in the house at the moment that's making a lot of racket. So it's a little distracting, and I apologize for that. So by the time Moses came around, all the Canaanite worship at Avaris had become fully Egyptianized in that respect. So if Moses had decided to, hey, okay, let's sacrifice a sheep to Yahweh at the Temple of Baal, yeah, there would have been a riot. There would have been a riot. So yeah, that's the reason. That's the reason why he actually presents that concern. That's why he has to go 3 days out. At least that's the pretense for it. Now, some have argued that this was a pretense. And I don't necessarily disagree with that interpretation. But that's the reason Moses gives for needing to go 3 days out. Is so he's far enough outside of Egypt that he won't incur the wrath of any Egyptian. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, and we can do Twitch it now. Okay, and let's see here. Okay, Angel VWM for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. What is your favorite book of the Old and New Testament? Ooh, interesting question. All right, I know this is going to seem like a pretty, how do you say, predictable answer. It's going to be a very predictable answer. My favorite book of the Old Testament is still Exodus. What can I say? I love Exodus. It's full of Egypt. It's I'm a sucker for Egypt. As far as New Testament, that's a little more difficult. I happen to like the Book of John. John is very theological, but it is still very Christ-centric. So I very much like the Book of John. So yeah, I admit I'm totally biased as far as my Old Testament reading is concerned. But you got to go with what you love. I mean, one of the things I tell people that when you're going into an academic field, people ask me, well, what field should I go into? What academic field should I go into? And I say, well, I can't answer that for you. What do you love to read? What do you love to read? Whatever you love to read, that's the academic field you should go into. Do you love reading about ancient Egypt? Then become an Egyptologist. If you love reading about West Semitic inscriptions, go into West Semitic inscriptions. If you love reading about the book of John, specialize in New Testament on John. If you love reading about the Exodus, become penniless for the rest of your life and become a Egyptologist that focuses on Exodus, like I do. You know, it's doing what you love, because you're going to be saddled with this for, say, the rest of your career. So you might as well love it. So yeah, absolutely, I'm totally biased here. I love the book of Exodus, totally biased. But I'm also, as far as the New Testament, I also love the book of John. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, and then we got Sentinel Apologetics for $5 Australian. Good to see you tonight, Rob. And he says, also, there's a Filipina girl here cheering you on as a Pogi Egyptologist. Word Pogi is pronounced Poggy and means handsome. Handsome. Wow. Well, right now I'm feeling very ill. So I don't know how poggy I am, but thank you very much for the compliment. And I could really use the cheering on tonight. I mean, you can tell that my voice here is also a little froggy at this point as well, which is because we did tape early this morning. We did tape our popcorn review early this morning. So I've actually done, despite being ill, I've actually done a lot of work today. So, but I'm glad somebody at the Philippines is actually watching this live right now. I'm just thrilled about that. I love the fact that we have an international appeal. I love the fact that our subscribers and our viewers come from the worldwide. We've lost actually count of how many nations are actually will view us now. But at one point it was like over 50. So we do really, really love hearing from our international viewers. It's just really, really thrilling. So the fact that a Filipino girl is cheering us on right now and watching this, it just warms our heart. So thank you very much for the super chat, and thank you for being here tonight, Rob. Really, very much appreciate it. And RG Strategy for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Get well soon, Dr. Falk. Well, thank you. Thank you for the super chat too. I don't know how long I'm going to be off with this thing. My employer says I have to be. I'm off work for a mandatory 5 days. Did I skip some super chats? Well, if it's because it might be because I didn't catch them, but let me just finish off this one and then we'll go back. So anyway, thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for the super chat and the well wishes. Very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Okay.
No, you're coming up. I'm a leopard now.
Okay.
Now, his super chats were too long, so he's got them in the comments.
Okay, let me see if I can find them in the side chat here. I don't see a skip.
No. He's just coming.
Oh. I do see one that was skipped, however. Oh yeah, I see a couple that were skipped. Yeah, several at the very beginning. It didn't, let's see if I'm going to pull them back in, because, man, those should not have been, no, okay, I'm going to have to do a couple of cuts and pastes here, because it's, Twidget did not pick these up, and I do not want to miss them. Okay, so I'm doing a little bit of triage here. This will take a few minutes. So do be patient with us. Maybe Kiara will tell you some jokes. No jokes from Kiara. The bunny will tell us jokes. All right. Okay, I'm going to... Okay. Okay, yeah, it looks like it skipped like 4 or 5 of them. That's the one problem we have with Twidget. It's not always the most reliable as far as being able to tap into it. So it has at times been a bit unreliable. But it's the best we have at the moment, so it's unfortunately that we can't do more about that. 3. Okay. Okay, I think I've got them all. All right, let's get back to these. Okay, these are the ones going. Oops. There we go. All right. Sentinel Apologetics posted another super chat, the previous one that we missed, for $5 Australian. Thank you very much for the super chat. He says, Daddy Falk, there's currently a Philippine audience watching you live right now. Hurrah! I'll be home on April 29th, so we can hash out Hebrews 6. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. I doubt you're going to convince me about Hebrews 6, but we can definitely have a discussion about this. But again, love the fact you're on tonight. Love the fact you're supporting the channel. It's always great to have you here. And I'm thrilled that you're having such a great time in the Philippines. And you're having such a wonderful time in the Philippines. Well, I'm stuck here in quarantine. Oh. I think the sun and surf would have done us a world of good. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're having a great time. I'm glad you're having a wonderful time, and I'm really, really glad that there's a Filipino audience watching this right now. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate this. Okay. The next one was the Camel Leopard for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. And I see it, and I see all the subsequent comments there, and I caught them all, so I cut them all out. And he says, too long for super chat posted in comments. Okay. And we skip down where he says, Shabbat Shalom, Dr. Falk. I pray your evening is well. Well, I've had better, honestly. But this is fun. This is fun. But yes, I've been in better health. What are your thoughts on Torah observances for Messianic believers? I see many claim it isn't necessary because of the new covenant, but Messiah said he didn't come to abolish the Torah. Okay. That is an excellent question. That's an excellent question. Okay. Now, I've been a Messianic believer. I've worked in a Messianic Jewish congregation. So I understand that there's a tension here. So, understanding that there is a tension here, we also have to understand that the law, as far as Torah, means several things. It means several things. So we have to be mindful of how the law is being used in its particular context. So, when it comes to Christ saying he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, he's talking about the sacrificial law. Essentially, when we look at, say, the Ten Commandments, the Sinai Covenant, and the Ten Commandments, we recognize that the Ten Commandments is not the same as, say, the Sinai Covenant. The Ten Commandments are given to Israel, but the Sinai Covenant is really the sacrificial system that is used so that Israel can have relationship with God in spite of its having broken the law, the Ten Commandments of that law, the Torah, the Decalogue. Okay? Now, within the Ten Commandments, it is seen that, say, the Sabbath law is the catch bucket law of the ceremonial law, basically the sacrificial system. So this is why Jesus Christ also calls himself the Lord of the Sabbath. He is the Lord of the Sabbath because he came to fulfill the Sabbath, to fulfill all the burdens of the ceremonial law. So when we talk about law, we have to be mindful here that the law that Christ is fulfilling is that ceremonial, sacrificial aspect of it. Okay, so then what does this mean for, say, the Messianic believer? Okay, and how does the Messianic believer still keep Torah, knowing that Christ did fulfill the sacrificial system? Well, okay. Now, at this point, any burden to say, have to come bring sacrifices to the temple for forgiveness, you don't have to do that anymore. You are forgiven. Christ has covered that sacrifice in its entirety. Do you still have to keep kosher? Well, actually, that too is part of the ceremonial law. So you don't really need to do that anymore either. It was very odd when I did work at a Messianic congregation. I worked as basically the administrative assistant, so I manned the phones. So what would happen is I would get calls all the time from Gentiles, of all things, that were really, really concerned that they weren't keeping kosher, or that they hadn't eaten unleavened bread or cleaned their homes prior to the Passover. The ironic thing is I never got these phone calls from other Jews, from other say Jewish believers. I never got those phone calls. It was always from Gentiles who would call, and they would ask the questions. Oh, should I be eating shrimp during Passover? Well, I mean, here am I. I'm the church secretary here at this Messianic congregation, and I'm going home at night and I'm having bacon wrapped shrimp. So, I mean, it doesn't get any less kosher than that. So, now with that said, I do know Messianic Jewish believers who do keep kosher. Some of them were raised as, say, Orthodox or Reformed Jews. And basically, that's how they ate, in their old life and in their new life in Christ. They just don't change their dietary habits. And some of that is just the fact that they don't find bacon palatable. So, I understand that. I knew one guy who one of the elders of this Messianic congregation. Oh, shrimp drafa. Unclean, dirty. But he was raised. I mean, he was raised in a Jewish home. He never ate he never ate anything but kosher. So for him, he just continue on doing it over. But then I knew other Messianic Jews who was just, hey, where's the bacon? Pass me the bacon. No meal's complete without bacon. So it really mileage really varies here. Okay, yeah. So it really really varies. So my thoughts on being Torah observant is you're supposed to keep the spirit of Torah, not necessarily the letter of the law of Torah. Because there's just some things you can't keep in Torah. It's not convenient. Some of it applies to, say, the theocratic kingdom of Israel. Some of it applies to the temple rituals or the tabernacle. So, given that so much of the law is consumed with those sorts of things, I don't think Torah observance is really something that Messianic believers need to pay a whole lot of focus on. But do keep the weightier matters of the law: justice, mercy, grace, truth. These are the highest matters of the law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. These are the two commands that summarize all the law and the prophets. If you do that, you become, basically, you are then living Torah. You are then living Torah. And these minor things, these minor matters of not having cheeseburgers, that doesn't matter one bit. Now, I have a bone to pick with that particular verse anyway. Interpreting, don't boil a lamb in its mother's milk, as relating to cheeseburgers. Okay, I don't. Yeah, no, I think there's a wrong interpretation there, but. Okay? But I don't think it matters. I just don't think it matters if you're keeping the weightier matters of the law. And if you're keeping the weightier matters of the law, Christ would affirm that anyway. Christ would affirm that anyway. Christ would definitely affirm, do not commit adultery. He would affirm, do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy. These are the highest matters. So, I sometimes think that sort of within Messianic congregations, it does tend to get too focused on the minutia, and sort of the big matters sometimes fall away. So anyway, that's my thought on this. I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, and the third one that kind of got skipped was Converse Contender for $4.99. Good to see you tonight, friend. And he says, I interviewed Dr. Averbeck today on his article in Behind the Scenes of the Old Testament. You're next. Until then, thoughts on the exclusivity of priesthood in Genesis 47:22. Okay, let's look at Genesis 47:22. Now, I love Richard Averbeck. He's a very good friend. He was my Akkadian teacher at Trinity. He was a tough teacher. I mean, he was really tough. Great sense of humor. He's a great guy, fun guy, great sense of humor. Real character. Love the guy. Absolutely love them. Brutal teacher, though. Brutal teacher. But I did learn a lot, too. Okay, so let's look at that passage. Genesis 47. $47.22. Okay. Um, I'm going to back up here to verse 20 because that'll give us some context here. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every Egyptian sold his fields, because the famine was severe upon them. Thus the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of Egypt to borders to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their land. Okay. Okay. What's going on here is is basically land endowments. Okay, and we do see this happen throughout Egypt's history. That certain classes of priests, and these are the major cults of Egypt. Like, for example, the cult of at Karnak at Thebes, at Luxor. The major cults of Egypt had land endowments that the priests would use and cultivate, or hire people to cultivate. And the produce of those lands was used exclusively for for giving offerings in the temples of the major cult temples in Egypt. Okay? So that land endowment was basically given by the king to the priests, the priesthoods, in perpetuity. So we do find that that in Egypt, that priests would have these endowments of land, and once the king endowed it to a priesthood, even though it was still technically owned by the king, it was really the priesthoods, and the priests could then use it to cultivate the food offerings. And those food offerings, after they were offered to the idols, they weren't burned. Egypt did not practice burnt offerings. Those offerings were then collected and then redistributed to the priests. So they were essentially used to feed the priests who did service in the temples. So that's what they were being used for. So essentially what we're talking about here is an untouchable class and an untouchable land allotment. So the king did not dare take those land allotments back. Now, of course, new kingdom or dynasty comes to the throne, all bets are off, all land endowments are off. But even so, sometimes even those land endowments were respected between dynasties as well. But generally, once a land endowment was given to a particular cult, a religious cult in Egypt, it remained with that cult in perpetuity. So it wasn't something that the king ever took back. Now, the only exception where a king ever took land back was during the reign of Akhenaten, where he takes back the land grants to choke off the offering supply to the temples of Egypt. And he does that to destroy them financially, to destroy them economically. So we very much see that, and frankly, it creates widespread instability in Egypt. It created widespread instability. Even though Akhenaten had a powerful enough army to sort of maintain his new status quo, it was not. Say his move here was not a stabilizing influence. So that's my thought here on Genesis 47:22, is that it is referring to the land grants that were given to the cults of Egypt. So it would have been very, very true that nobody would have taken those back. Joseph wouldn't. King definitely wouldn't. And without the authority of the king here to do it, Joseph wouldn't have done it either. But I think this is really, really interesting here that it's pointed out. This is one of those things that's sort of, little detail. There's a lot of little, say, details about Egypt in the Pentateuch that really sort of scream that they were actually there, and this is just another one of those. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the super chat, and I look forward to talking with you next about the behind the scenes of the Old Testament. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. I'm glad you were here tonight. I cut like 5 minutes of your interview this morning with Dr. Averbeck, but I was on the bus, so I couldn't get too much of it. But I will probably go back and take a look at it because, as I say, I love Dick. He's a great guy. Great guy. Okay, so that catches us up with the lost super chats here. So, let's see what else we got here. Lou for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Was the covenant made with Israel an ancient suzerain vassal treaty? Yes, it was. Okay. Now, we know it's a vassal, suzerain vassal treaty because it's structured very, very much like late bronze suzerain treaties that we find from, say, the Hittites. That's probably the closest point of comparison we have. If you want more information on this, there is a great but exceptionally expensive set of books on this called Treaties, Laws, and Covenants by Kenneth Kitchen and Paul Lawrence. I think it came out in 2013 or 14. It's a big, thick... It's a one big volume with two small volumes attached, where he basically collects all the law codes, suzerain treaties, and treaties from the ancient Near East, all except two that came out like after publication. So it's a one-stop resource if you're all into treaties and all that. But he goes into the structures of these various treaties. Where there's an appeal to a god. Here's the strictures. Then there you've got blessings and curses, and basically a swearing to the gods. Where in the particular case of Yahweh, he swears to himself because there is no higher authority. So yeah, definitely the covenant at Sinai is definitely structured like a suzerain vassal treaty. So without more specifics, it's hard to get into, but it's definitely there. It's definitely there. It is structured like it. So very, very cognizant of that. But we would expect that too, because that's sort of the normal treaty that's the normal treaties we find in the ancient Near East, are these suzerain vassal or monarch to monarch, diplomatic treaties are the two sort of treaties we do find in the ancient world. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, Eddie Vasquez for $4.99, and he writes, "Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate your super chat. I can never think of a good question to ask, so here's a super chat donation for someone with a question, if I may do that." Absolutely. I don't know who. Well, okay, we'll let's see, super chat. Let me go scan for a non-super chat, and we'll take that right now. Okay, I'm going to quickly scan for a non-super chat, and that will be your question. Okay, so let's see if we find one here. Sorry? Or did he have one in mind?
Brick Creation had sent me his extension, and that was that preterists get their info from.
Yeah, I've already put that up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's already been put up, hon. Yeah, I already commented that it was a great thing, but I can't comment it because I don't know it per se. Okay, so let's see here. Non-super chat. Where are you? I don't see many Q colons, so... let's see here. I want something... Oh, let's go right to the beginning. I do notice that most of my viewers put the non-super chats at the very beginning, and then it just goes into live stream. I'll take this Warrior from the Most High. So that will be... that's the super chat that Eddie Vasquez purchased. Thank you very much, Eddie. Very much appreciated. And your question is... How high is 15 cubits in Genesis 7:20? Okay. Genesis 7:20. And the verse reads, the water prevailed 15 cubits higher and the mountains were covered. Okay. Now, a cubit is... we will do... I need a calculator here because my math is not so good. So... Yeah, I know. I got a PhD and I can't do simple addition in my head. Okay. Now, there are 3 cubits defined in the ancient world. There's the standard cubit. It's 18 inches. Then you got the royal cubit, which is 21 inches. And then you've got what's called the divine cubit, which is 24 inches. So there's actually 3 different cubits in the ancient world. So it'll often depend upon context here. Now, we're not told which cubit it is, so we're going to have to assume it's the standard cubit. And that's the cubit that the Bible uses most often. There is some evidence that they used the other cubits as well, but the evidence is weak, and it's weak. It's not compelling, but there is some evidence that the other cubits were used also. But let's just say it's the standard cubit. So 15 cubits times 18 inches, or 1.5 feet, is roughly 22.5 feet. So that's the quick answer to the question, is how high is 15 cubits? It's 22.5 feet. So anyway, I hope that answered your question, Warrior of the Most High. And thank you, Eddie Vasquez, for sponsoring a non-super chat. That was really, really kind and really, really generous of you. Very much appreciate that. I do love it when my subscribers show kindness. It's thrilling. Very, very inspiring. Okay. Andrew Mansour for $5 Canadian. Thank you very much for the super chat. Okay. And he says, growing up, we usually watched the miniseries Jesus of Nazareth at this time. Thought on that series? I don't think I've watched it. Honestly. I mean, I do have my favorite gospel series. Okay, my favorite has always been the Gospel of John. I think it runs something like 6 hours. It's very long. But I don't know if I've watched the one called Jesus of Nazareth. At least I don't recall having seen it. So, because I can't recall having seen it, I can't really say much about it. Now, I do watch, say, some historical miniseries that are Bible-based. Okay. I've also seen some pretty dreadful ones, too, that were also supposedly Bible-based. Oh, spare me the ones on Noah. Oh, Oh. I mean, I haven't seen a single movie slash miniseries done on Noah that wasn't atrocious. Okay, so, however, um, I can't comment on Jesus of Nazareth. The Gospel of John's really good. I really liked the Gospel of John. The new one, was it? No, I can't remember the name of the new one. The ones that's just coming in, the one that was crowdsourced. I haven't seen season 2 of that one. I saw season 1, and it was actually pretty good. They did take artistic liberties with it. I will say they took artistic liberties with it. But they did capture the sense of it. Even though they did not always capture, say, the literality of it. So, yeah, some are good, some are really good, some are bad. Passion of Christ, I'm not so fond of. I know Mel Gibson went into a lot of, he spent a lot of money on that. It's always struck me that, like, for the example, the Passion of Christ always struck me as being more the wrath of man more than the wrath of God. The crucifixion is not just about the wrath of man. It's about the wrath of God. And Eddie Vasquez points out here, The Chosen. That's the most recent series in there. Yeah, the first season of that was really good. And I will definitely grant that. The season 1. I haven't seen season 2 yet. So I can't comment further on that. Oh, Mr. Rich Bewley, finally someone else who hates the Passion of the Christ. Yeah, I'm just not a big fan of the Passion of the Christ. I actually saw it in theaters, and it was just gratuitous. It was gratuitous, and it was about as I said, the wrath of man. It was the wrath of man, not the wrath of God. So I did not care for that. I did not care for that at all. So, let's see, where do I pick it up here? So anyway, that's about all I can say about various miniseries about Jesus Christ. Thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. All right, we've got a $5 super chat from Jack Ray. Doesn't seem to be any question. Is there a question there? Did you see one? After Jack Ray? Well, anyway, I want to thank you for that super chat. If there's a question we can answer, love to do so. But if you're just supporting the channel, we appreciate your super chats and want to thank you very much for your generous support. It does help us. It really helps us make ends meet and help us to continue doing this as regularly as we do so. So anyway, thank you so much for that super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay. Linguist Ammo for $5. Thank you very much. Good to see you tonight, friend. I pray for a speedy recovery. Well, thank you. It's never fun to be sick. It's never fun to be sick. And it does make doing this a little less fun, even though I have to admit I'm still having a good time, even though the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I feel my flesh giving out on me here. So I do appreciate the well wishes and the prayers for recovery. Hopefully it will be speedy, because then I get to go back to work and be able to pay the rent, and because they don't give me a lot of sick leave. I don't have much sick leave. Being a casual employee, one has very few benefits and very few rights. So the province of British Columbia gives you 3 sick days, and if you use more than that, then you're out of pocket on your own. Then you have to take a leave of absence, and then it's just, you're kind of hosed. So yes, it is important for me to get a speedy recovery, just to be able to continue to, pay the rent, pay the bills, and all that stuff. So again, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and this does really, really help us. So thank you so much. Okay. Sean Horton for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Good to see you tonight, friend. As a historian, how do you react to the expression, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it? When I don't have a real question, I got backup dumb ones. Well, I realize that some of our subscribers are asking, questions that they may know the answers to already, just to help support the channel. And we appreciate that. We appreciate people who just wave their hands, say, hello, here's a super chat just to help you out. We do adore that. We have found out that we have needed this. One of the things about when we started this channel, and it's coming up to 2 years very soon. May 5th will be our second anniversary for this channel. And when I started this channel, I had just lost my job because of the COVID pandemic. Ironically, I now have the Rona. 2 years took me 2 years to contract it finally. However, I had started this channel because I had time on my hands. I was on COVID relief benefits, so I didn't have to worry about the bills when I first started this channel. And then we quickly gained monetization, and then it's like, okay, those benefits run out, and now you have to sort of work for a living. Okay, yeah, sure. That's normally the way I work anyway. I mean, I always believed in tent maker ministries, where I would hold a high-paying job and then, work on my ministry on my spare time, and I was totally comfortable with that. Well, it never sort of dawned on me that, I would no longer, because of the pandemic, be able to get those high-paying jobs anymore. So, having then to go to a low-paying job, we started then doing these. It was just before having to go to that low-paying job that we started doing these live streams. So it was like I think it was 3 months before I got that low-paying job that I started doing live streams here. And it's become an important source of income for us. It's really made the difference between us paying the rent and not paying the rent. So, absolutely, you guys are helping us. We're grateful. We are really, really grateful. When I say I appreciate a super chat, we mean it. Because, if without them, we're really stuck. And we're really not people that grift a lot. You might notice that our teaching channel, when we do the teaching videos, we never ask for support on our Monday releases. We don't ask for you to hit the subscribe button. We never ask for you to join our Patreon. Yeah, it's all listed in the description, but we never make a point of pointing it out in the video. We have all that though. We have Patreon. We have GoFundMe. We do have a couple of cryptocurrency wallets, but we don't make a point to ask. We've always had this sentiment that if we're doing a service for the kingdom, if we're actually doing ministry, if what we're doing has a value, that God will support it. If what we do has value, then the people of God, those who are also benefiting from it, they'll support the work. And we have been really, really surprised that, people have rallied around us. They really have said, hey, we think your work has value. So, here's a super sticker, or here's a inane question with a donation. That's so cool. That's so cool. That's so awesome. You know, so I do think I'm appreciative of these questions, because every one of these means that we get to survive another month, to do more ministry, to make more videos, to make more content, to bring more information out to the community. And we're here to serve the community. So absolutely thrilled, love the fact that that you're here and that you support us. Okay, so I'm going to answer the question now. Now that I've thanked you effusively, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Okay. I have found that even when people do know history, they often are doomed to repeat it. Okay. I don't think learning from history is necessarily a hedge to from repeating it. There's another saying by Mark Twain that I really like. History never repeats, but it sure does rhyme. And I think that is very interesting. I think that almost captures the sentiment even better. Okay? Because we don't see history exactly repeating itself, but we do see it falling in similar patterns. Like, for example, the recent invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Okay? Now, Russia has invaded Ukraine several times. This is not the first time it's ever happened. Okay? And while what they have done in Ukraine is very, very similar to past invasions that were attempted during the Soviet era, this is not the same. It's not the same by a long shot. Ukraine's putting up a stiff resistance. They're really fighting for their lives. So, even when something looks like it's going to follow a historical pattern, it doesn't always do this. And just because you learn about history doesn't mean that you aren't going to follow it, or that you aren't going to, or that you have the power to prevent it repeating. We see this, for example, in the history of socialism. Socialism has been tried many times. It's been tried many times. There are so many intellectuals out there that have learned about the history of socialism. Yet, it's an experiment that keeps being repeated over and over and over again. And part of it is the disbelief of, well, if only we had done it, we'd do it right. So, this is why it never quite turns out the way, say, idealists want to think about. So even if you've learned about history, that's no guarantee you're not going to repeat it. Okay? It can still end up a complete disaster, even if you know the history, even if you know the pitfalls, because ultimately the future is unpredictable. No one knows the future except God himself. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Even if it's not a real question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and have a great night. Okay, and then we have got Sam Harris here for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Hi, Dr. Falk. Last live stream I asked about in your thoughts on Deuteronomy being a forgery. I forgot to ask if you know any good scholarly works on this. And who's the most badass ancient king? Okay. Wow. I'll answer the last one first. Mostly because I don't actually know any good works on on Deuteronomy being a forgery. Okay. Uh, so it's hard for me to give you a recommendation there when I don't actually know the scholarly literature on that particular aspect of Deuteronomy. Okay, so I can't really give you a book recommendation there. So I can only answer that last question then. Who's the most badass ancient king? I would probably say the most badass ancient king was probably Nebuchadnezzar II. Okay? Or, so as he's known, Nebuchadnezzar the Great. Okay? Now, he's really badass. He basically kicks the stuffings out of the Assyrian Empire. I mean, he destroys them at Carchemish. You know, he and the Medes, you know, go up and fight the Assyrians and the combined Assyrians and Egyptian forces, and basically kicks their butts. You know, destroys Assyria entirely and sends Egypt packing back to Egypt. But he's not content to continue on there. He just sweeps through the entire Assyrian Empire, swallows up a good portion of the Neo-Hittites, goes down into Assyria, conquers, what remained of the Assyrian holdings of northern Israel, takes Jerusalem. He takes Jerusalem. And then when his governor, or Gedaliah, gets assassinated, some of his men go on a raiding party and wreak havoc down Egypt. Okay? There's some real badass qualities to this. I mean, not only is he an incredibly competent military leader, but he also has empowered his men to take on initiative. So he's not a lone cowboy. You know, he's not just, say, one man, leading an army and it's his might alone. He's depending upon, say, the initiative and the brutality of his underlings to achieve his goals. So, very badass. Now, the other one I would put really, really high up on that badass list had to be Tutmosis III. Tutmosis campaigned, I think it was something like 12 or 15 campaigns into Syria and Nubia. Now, Tutmosis III is a very, very interesting character. Tutmosis III hated the vagaries of court life because he'd been shafted by his stepmother, Hatshepsut. She stole the throne from him. And didn't give it back to him until she died when he was in his 20s. Okay? So, you know, it was his throne by right. She usurped it. And she thought if she sent him off to the military, that he might conveniently die on the battlefield. Well, Tutmosis III was very, very successful in the military. He was charismatic. He was a good military leader. He was an excellent military leader. And he loved the military life. There's nothing Tutmosis III would rather do than be on campaign. You know, he was one of those kings that, you know, kind of almost like Richard the Lionheart, that hated to be at home on the throne. Did not like being at home at all. Thus, he spent every opportunity he could going out on campaign. You know, he's one of those guys that wakes up in the morning and says, I love the smell of burning olive oil in the morning. You know? That's Tutmosis III in a nutshell. He loved the military life. Absolutely adored the military life. So, those are sort of my two candidates for the most badass kings. Nebuchadnezzar II and Tutmosis III. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And wonderful question. Sorry I couldn't answer that first one. It's just outside of my scope of reading. So anyway, but I have to admit too where my limitations are as well. So thank you very much for that super chat. The Camel Letter for $5. Thank you very much for that super chat. Since you've seen The Chosen, thoughts on their depiction of Moshe? Seems they got the date right. Okay, winky face. Okay. Now, yes and no. Yes and no. They got the date right, and then they backtracked completely from it in the next episode when they did, say, the serpent in the wilderness. I don't know why they did that. That just seemed to me sort of kind of a bit of cowardice here. I think they got the date right. And then they sort of said to themselves, we got the date right, but we're going to have too many people, raise a fuss over this, so we're going to go the opposite date instead. I don't get why they did that. I get why they did that, but I'm disappointed that they did that. They could have put forward a consistent set of history. A history that is consistent with the depictions of Moshe in the Bible. They could have done it consistent with the archaeology. And so it was one of those things that, yes, they went sort of halfway, but I'm disappointed that they didn't go all the way either. So, I don't think they'll right. I think they've sort of learned their lesson, and I think they're learned a lesson from this, and I think they're just going to sort of back away from real history from now on, as far as say pre turn of the millennia. So as far as BC history, I think they're gonna shy away from that entirely from now on, because I think they had I think they had a very, very bad reaction to getting the date right. Unfortunately, a lot of the fundamentalist and the evangelical public is just not ready to hear it yet. And channels like ours is trying to change that, but it's slow in coming. It's really, really slow in coming. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate that. Okay. Mystery Flavor for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he says, I'm sure you've answered this before, but would you recommend Christians to read the Book of Enoch? Well, it depends why they're reading the Book of Enoch. If they're reading it to sort of get a handle on Second Temple literature, then sure, why not? Read widely. If they're reading it to get more insight out of the Bible, I think it's probably pretty worthless for that. Now, I know Heiser's a huge fan of the Book of Enoch. A lot of what he does is centered around Second Temple literature, and particularly the Book of Enoch. I personally don't find it useful myself, but then again, I'm not a huge fan of Second Temple literature. That's because my focus tends to be more on Torah and Bronze Age literature. But then again, too, I don't recommend that people read, say, Bronze Age literature to understand the Bible better. Although if you want to understand Bronze Age literature, yeah, there's definitely works out there to read. And I think that is a bona fide reason to read it. So would I recommend that the average Christian read the Book of Enoch? Probably not. Probably not. Would I recommend that somebody who wants to know more about Second Temple literature read the Book of Enoch? Sure, absolutely. It's a good sort. It's a book that sort of covers the sort of the ideas and the concepts that you do find in Second Temple literature. So in that respect, it is helpful. So it really always boils down to it depends. I'd never recommend the Book of Enoch to a baby Christian. Because a baby Christian really does need to get into the Word of God first and really read the Bible and get a firm grounding in the Christian faith before he sort of veers off into deeper, more complicated subjects. It all depends on where you are in your life, where you are in your spiritual walk. Are you still drinking milk or are you eating steak? And frankly, I would prefer that more Christians were eating steak, eating meat, instead of, say, sort of wallowing in the milk. But unfortunately, we are living in those sort of times when biblical illiteracy has never been so high. So, I have to, because biblical literacy is as high as it is right now, I do have to express certain cautions about reading some extra biblical sources. And I would basically put a note of caution on the Book of Enoch. It's not scripture. It's not inspired. It can seem inspired to somebody who doesn't know their Bibles, but it's not. But it is something that is representative of Second Temple literature. So anyway, I hope that explains my view on this. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I have very, very poor for these $20 super chats. I have very poor contrast on my monitor. I have a very old monitor, so it tends to be very red. And these $19.99 super chats are giving me red on red, so it's hard for me to read them. I think Danny Arnez, is that correct? Just a second while I get this on a. Yeah, my eyes are playing tricks on me here. Armas. Sorry about that. As I said, it's hard for me to read on my monitors. I don't have the best equipment here, so but we make do with what we have. Danny Armas, thank you very much for this super chat of $19.99. Very, very much appreciated, even though my eyesight and my monitors are not so good. Just cause and God bless. Well, thank you very much, and God bless you also. I very, very much appreciate the super chat. We love the support of everyone who wants to help us out and to help continue the work that we're doing. So I very, very, very much appreciate this super chat and the support, even the blessings. Even the blessings are wonderful. The prayers, the blessings, all that. Yes, it's just emotional support, but we need that too. And we very much appreciate it, and this so much helps us. And as I said before, we go back and we read every live stream and every comment in the live stream after the show's over. And so we try to read everything that people have posted. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat, and thank you for the blessings, and God bless you also, and have a great night. Okay, Jamie C for $49.99. Thank you very much for that generous super chat. So appreciated. And he says, I have a number of believing friends caught up in what can be best described as Bible fan fiction type conspiracy theories. Oh, sorry. The Nephilim are always a favorite launch point. Some seem harmless, some are concerning. It all seems distracting. Thoughts? Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I do actually have some thoughts on this. Um, there has been a rise in this fan fiction that has been surrounding, um, particularly the Nephilim, and it is essentially an extrapolation of a lot of the theories that have been proposed by Michael Heiser. Now, I've said it before. I like Michael Heiser. I think he's a great theologian. Okay, I think he's a very, very good theologian. Um, his expertise in Second Temple literature is excellent. Um, he has actually come up with some really creative solutions that I think are just spot on, absolutely dead accurate. Clever ways of viewing some of these classical problems of theology and religion. I do think he carries the Nephilim stuff too far, though. Okay, I only go halfway down the road with him on the Nephilim. Okay. I do think there's something spiritual behind the Nephilim, but I don't think the Nephilim are essentially these god-human hybrids. So I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that one bit. I think there's an ancient Near Eastern explanation that's much simpler. However, his views have very much resonated with a lot of fiction writers. And the reason why it resonates with a lot of fiction writers is it provides a theogony, basically a story about the birth of the gods. And we see that Christian fiction, fan fiction, and basically commercial fiction is very prone to these sorts of things. Like Frank Peretti's This Present Darkness. The whole idea of, this interaction of the spirit world with angels and demons and prayer shields, sort of came out of a revivalist point of view, but it was a revivalist point of view that provided a backdrop that Peretti could use to write his fiction. Okay, so then when you got, say, Michael Heiser publishing in 2015, that was like matched to a gasoline, because there had been nothing like that people, especially Christian fiction writers, could then, say, use to provide a framework for describing something something spiritual within a fictional setting. So this is why, say, Heiser's concept of the Nephilim is so attractive to fiction writers. They can take, there's one fiction writer who was doing something on the Qin dynasty, and then it's basically saying that, there's a Nephilim. There's a Nephilim behind the Qin dynasty who's, acting as the pagan god. Well, Heiser has provided a framework that these fiction writers can do to sort of distract from, say, to distract people into these more fantastical, conspiracy-like theories. So I agree with you here. Some of this is harmless. Some of this is concerning. And I do agree with you. It does seem distracting. And it's this distracting part, though, that's concerning. Because when you start getting into those types of distractions, it tends to take the focus away off of gospel concerns. Sort of the essentials of the faith. And it starts getting into these minutiae that, are not that well founded. Or might distract away from, say, better interpretations of the specific passages involved. So, that's my thoughts here. I'm not opposed to Christian fiction. I don't think a lot of it is high quality, but I'm also not opposed to it either. I just think that there is concern here that it could lead people off into doing stuff such as demonology in a way that that takes the focus off of Christ himself. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Have a great night. All right. Catafact 3 for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Most metal any god other than Yahweh? Okay. Well, oh boy. Well, the Egyptians thought that the flesh and bones of a god were made of metal. The Egyptians believed this. That the flesh of a god was made of gold, and the bones of a god was made of iron. And if you want a really dramatic example of this, you can have a look at the shipwrecked sailor, which is a wonderful story from ancient Egypt. A sailor gets shipwrecked on an island, and he encounters this super tall snake god, whose skin is all gold and his eyes are lapis. Well, this is very, very typical of the ancient depiction of gods, which is to show the gods as having metal as flesh. This is why, for example, in the very, very center of the temples of Egypt, not the stone idols on the outside, those are just the gods' ears and eyes and that sort of thing. But in the very, very center where they believed the real presence of the god was, inside the sacred barks, was a little tiny idol, no more than 18 inches tall, that was just made of electrum or gold. And those were the idols that were considered to be the real flesh of the gods. The real presence. So just about any god will fit that description in ancient Egypt. Okay? What was I saying? Oh, music metal. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant metal. I was a metal worker once. Of course I'm going to think about metal. You could... If I'm wrong, you could clarify, too. I mean, I don't think there is any hard rock heavy metal gods in the ancient Near East, You can't expect me to be too on the ball tonight. I mean, I'm dealing with my own problems here. Yeah, he clarifies. Yeah, I meant the music style. Yeah, that's going to be really anachronistic. That's going to be really hard to say, trace back to an ancient Near Eastern god. I think you have to more go to the Norse gods for that. Honestly, if you want the music style heavy metal, yeah, you're not going to find that in the ancient Near East. You're going to find that amongst the Norse gods, Odin, Thor, those dudes. They're the ones with the better music. Alright. We do have a few more super chats. We're going to round out those super chats and then we're going to call it a night because my body is totally giving out on me here. And I think everyone can see it. So, at the point where everyone can see I'm wearing out, that's the time for me to quit. So, I'm going to cover these last few super chats and then we are just going to call it a night here. Okay? We have a super chat from Isaac Sanders for 1337. Thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. What do you make of the fact that when Moses tossed his staff down with fear and uncertainty before Yahweh in Exodus 4, it turned into a nakash? And he continues. But when Aaron cast down, when they met Pharaoh, it became Tananim. Okay. Now, the problem here is that we are somewhat uncertain of the meaning of these various terms. Lexicography has come a long way, and that's the study of the meaning of words. But we're still dealing with some particular uncertainties here, especially with these particular figures. Now, it's not a seraph or a seraph, which is another, not just a fire angel, but it's also cobra. Now, a nakash is a viper. It's a viper. It's not a cobra, it's a viper. A tananim is different again. A tananim is a serpent. It's a serpent. It's almost more of akin to a dragon. Okay? Now, here's what my thoughts is. When we look at, say the Exodus narrative here, I'm going to go back to the original super chat here. In Exodus 4, for me, and I'm here. I'm going to be honest right here. I'm entering into the realm of speculation. I don't speculate often. I don't like speculation. I'm very uncomfortable with speculating, but here I'm less uncomfortable about doing it here. Okay. One of the things we see when it is turned into the Tananim in the court of the Pharaoh is it devours the other serpents, the other snakes of Pharaoh's magicians. Now, one thing that you have to really understand about snakes is they're very slow eaters. They're incredibly slow eaters. They take a long time to swallow something. Like 10 minutes. Like if you have one snake eating another snake, it'll take 10 minutes to swallow the whole thing. Or even a rat. It takes a long time for a snake to swallow a rat. There's no way that Aaron would have had his snake swallow, or get in the process of swallowing one snake without the other magicians, rescuing their snakes. Okay. This seems to imply that the devouring of the snakes of the magicians happened very, very fast. Very, very fast. Like, gulp, it's gone. Gulp, it's gone. Gulp, it's gone. Okay? Now, there is one species of, say, serpent-like, lizard-like beast in Egypt that can do this. And do this really effectively. Which is the Nile monitor. The Nile monitor eats snakes. And it eats snakes fast. So if you've got a bunch of priests here who turn their staffs into vipers, and then Aaron turns his staff into a Nile monitor, those vipers are lunch. Those vipers are lunch. So, so this is speculation on my behalf, and I think here basically the Tananim is the Nile Monitor. Okay, so but keep in mind that's speculation. Speculation. I'd have to do a lot more work on this to make it anything more than speculation, but that's sort of where I am on my thinking on this. Is that it's probably a Nile Monitor, and that, say, Tananim is vague enough that it can apply to that as well, whereas a Nakash is a viper of a kind. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated and very interesting question. Okay. Sheldon Himmelsbach for $20. Thank you very much for the super chat. I love your defense of the Exodus, and thanks for responding to my question about Egypt cement on Twitter. Get well soon. Well, thank you. We try to answer as many questions as we can. I do feel sometimes like I'm butter being scraped too thin across a piece of toast. We did enjoy, in the early stages of this channel, being able to answer everyone's questions, and it wouldn't matter if it was a good question, bad question. We just love the fact that we could just do this and answer everyone's questions. We're finding we're no longer able to do that. It's growing pains. It's growing pains. There's too few of us, and too much work. The fields are the wheat in the fields are ripe, and there's just not enough people for the harvest. So, it's very, very difficult for us to in that because we really do want to respond to everyone's questions, but we just don't have the time. So we have started getting selective about what questions we do answer, and where we answer them. Like we make it a point of answering everyone's super chat here on the live stream, and as many non-super chats as we can get away with, which will unfortunately be less than tonight because I'm feeling really sick. But we do try to make it a point. And even during the week, especially after a new video release, we try to answer the majority of questions. It's like, for example, after Monday videos, we make it a point to answer as many questions on that particular. But if someone asks a question, on a video that we did like 18 months ago, I may not answer it. It just, there's other priorities at that point, and people are not really coming back at that point to view it. So it's less of a priority. So we're having to prioritize our questions now, and I didn't want to do that, but we were kind of forced to do that. So we've got so much work that if I was doing this full time, it'd be different. Be different too. If we were doing this full time, we'd be taking a lot of these Q&A sessions, live streams, turning them into shorts. We would be doing a lot more small content. We might have had merch, but again, it's just us. It's just us, and we're just doing the best we can to serve our community, to serve the faith, and to be welcoming to others as well. So I'm very, very glad that we were able to answer your question on Twitter. So much appreciate the fact that you were on here tonight and you gave us a really generous super chat. So I want to thank you very much, and it is our pleasure to serve. So have a great night, and thank you so much. Biblical Brainstorm for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Do you think Arioch, king of Eleazar, is Rimsin Ariochu of Larsa? If so, why do you think they used the Sumer name Ariochu and not the Akkadian name Rimsin? I'd have to look into that some more, honestly. I have looked into, say, say, the king of Shinar. I've looked into the king of Elam. Those are places that we have really, really good records for. We have good records for both Elam, or at least, well, better records than, say, of Larsa. We have excellent records of Babylon. So those, which is Shinar. So, those are really, really easy to look up. I haven't actually looked at Arioch. Again, time. It's a time issue. There's a lot of things I do need to look up and do my own background reading, and I just haven't had the opportunity to do that. Again, it's again that we have very, very limited hours in a day, and we love coming in on these live stream Q&As, but we do find that to make all this content and to do the tent maker ministry, we do have to make certain sacrifices. And one of those sacrifices does involve how much reading I do. I used to do a lot of reading. Given my druthers, I'd still do this. If I was doing this full time, I'd probably spend a whole day just on reading. Just to keep up on things, to bone up on them and all that. But under the current circumstances of my employment, I can't. So, at this point, I'd have to admit that I don't know. I'd have to look into it in further detail. But by asking this, you are showing me you have an interest. And if you show me there's an interest here, then I'm more likely to do the work and prioritize it. So, I do appreciate the questions, even those questions we can't answer. Because if you give us questions we can't answer, that gives us room to grow. We then know that here's a place that we have a lacuna, where we have a deficit in knowledge, and that we need to go do the reading, do the research, and come up with an opinion. Whether it's an opinion that says yes, no, I don't know, or still don't know. We do value all the questions, the ones we can answer, the ones we can't. So, as I said, and this is one of those cases where I don't know. I haven't done the requisite reading here, so I have to say, yeah. You'll have to probably wait until I do the reading. So, anyway, I want to thank you for that super chat and very much appreciate it. Okay, now, that is the last super chat of the night. We almost went 3 hours here. I just can't take anymore. I am just absolutely, I'm absolutely exhausted. Frankly, I am actually surprised I was actually able to make it through this far, given how sick I am. So, I want to thank everyone who turned out tonight. I want to thank everyone who was able to put up with me tonight. Who tolerated my incessant coughing and sort of drowsy disposition. Seriously, I want to thank everyone who provided a super chat tonight. I want to thank all our Patreon supporters who don't get nearly as much recognition and credit as they deserve. And I also want to thank our regular viewers who really support us by leaving comments and leaving likes. And even those dislikes. Believe it or not, if you leave a dislike on a channel, it actually adds to the algorithm. They think they're interacting. YouTube is more likely to promote it, even if there's a dislike. But I prefer likes over dislikes. I mean, call the vanity in me, but I still prefer likes over dislikes. Okay. And final thing is, again, final reminder is that we on May 2nd at 8 p.m. That's Monday, at 8 p.m., not a.m. We are doing a new popcorn review, and that is exciting. We always love doing the popcorn reviews. We haven't done one since December, so it's been a long time since we've done one. Finding appropriate material for doing popcorn reviews is very difficult. But this one just came walking in the front door. So we couldn't help but do this one. Oh boy. We got one more super chat. We are closing it off here, but I will quickly take it out because I think it just requires a yes or no answer. Lion Farm puts in a very last minute, like midnight super chat for $2. Israelites went through the wilderness in Africa. No, they didn't. I'm sorry. We have more than enough evidence from the topography, from the toponyms, to show that the Israelites went through the wilderness in the Sinai. That's where they went through the wilderness. The toponyms that we find in Egyptian records are just conclusive about this. So, as much as I appreciate the super chat, and as much as I love getting super chats, this one is definitely a no. The evidence is just conclusive on this one. So anyway, the wilderness experience happened in the Sinai. Actually, it wasn't a desert at the time; it was a savanna. But the toponyms that we find in the Sinai are congruent with the ones we find in the books of Exodus and Numbers. So anyway, that's the last super chat, and that is our final comment for the night. Anyway, again, join us for our popcorn review on May 2nd. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Good night, everyone.